welcome you all for the second class of Indians DNB sessions. As discussed last time, we'll today go ahead with a case presentation by Dr. Vasundhara. She's first year resident from second year resident from Spandana Hospitals, Bangalore. Over to you, Vasundhara.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Dr. Vasundhara from Spandana Nursing Home. I would like to present a case today. So I'm going to start now. Patient Mrs. I, 80-year-old married female, educated up to SSLC, homemaker, belonging to a middle socio-economic status, from urban Bangalore, Hindu by religion, brought by her husband. The informant is the husband and the patient. The information is reliable and adequate. The patient presented with complaints of feeling a sensation of something stuck in her throat for the past 3 years, difficulty in eating for the past 2 years, feeling excessively tired for the past 1 year, decreased interest in activities for the past 1 year, is insidious in onset, a continuous course with no current precipitating factors identified. Patient was apparently maintaining well about 3 years ago when she began experiencing a constant itching sensation in her throat during morning hours. She used to gargle with hot water in order to relieve herself, but would not be relieved. Over the past 2-3 weeks, it progressed to a sensation of something being stuck in her throat. She felt like it was a food particle. She would strain and cough repeatedly in attempts to expel it. She avoided cold items, but on finding no relief, she consulted an Ayurvedic doctor who provided herbs that she consumed, which failed to relieve her. This continued for about 6 months. When her symptoms began to worsen, she would find it difficult to swallow solid and liquid foods, and even her own saliva. She reported that due to something being stuck in her throat, the fluids wouldn't go inside. She would spend 2 to 3 hours in her bathroom with repetitive spitting about 10 to 20 times, straining and coughing, but nothing would seem to relieve her, and only colorless spit would come out. Troubled by her state, she consulted multiple physicians and specialists. She underwent up to 7 consultations in about 1.5 years, with the trial of antibiotics, nebulization for about a year, and several investigations, including routine blood tests, a chest x-ray, sputum analysis. During her consultations, the doctor would which seemed to be normal. During her consultations, the doctors would examine her and explain that there was nothing to worry about, that her tests were all normal. She would refuse to accept their advice, and any alternative explanations, she would refuse any alternative explanations. She continued believing that there was something stuck in her throat. She would often blame the doctors for neglect, for not being able to diagnose her. She also felt neglected by her family members for not realizing the seriousness of her condition. Simultaneously, she was found to be crying continuously. She began feeling low. She would cry continuously. For days, she reported feeling lonely and not being able to get help. She was also found to be sitting alone in a dark room by herself. She would prefer remaining there even if guests would visit, which was unlike her previous self, where she was welcoming and would take initiative to meet her guests. She had stopped talking to her family members and would end up crying when spoken to for being neglected. She had lost her appetite, would not feel hungry, needed to be persuaded to eat, even then would only consume 4 to 5 biscuits, half a glass of water, mashed half a cup of rice at one sitting, complaining that it would not go down her throat because of something being stuck in her throat. She had lost about 38 kgs in 3 years. Her weight had reduced from 84 kgs to 46 kgs. She was found to become tired easily. She was unable to walk without the help of a support, and even with the help of a walker, she would be able to walk for only 10 to 15 minutes, was unable to get up from her bed, and would spend her day lying down. Over the past 3 months, she reported not being able to lift her head or brush her teeth and bathe, and her husband had assisted her in doing so. She had stopped reading her books, newspapers, which she would adhere to as a strict routine earlier. She would enjoy embroidery during the evening hours, which she had stopped. Multiple efforts needed to be made to get her to watch television, which she would do for no more than 30 minutes. Her sleep had reduced from a normal 7 hours to 4 to 5 hours at present over the past 3 months, and she would repeatedly wake up at night. Over the past 3 months, she was found to be expressing how she would not recover, that it was fate for her to suffer, and she had stopped praying to God and wished to end her suffering. Her mornings would begin with regretting the fact that she had awakened from her sleep. Awakened from her sleep. She had been asking her family members to feed her poison, to bring her a rope to hang so she could end her life. And she was brought to the emergency room for a consultation. Negative history. No history of investigations revealing an obstruction or growth in her throat. No history of previous suicide attempts. No history of beliefs that her organs were rotting, deteriorating, a foul-smelling odor from her body. Infestations of any insects from her body. No history of fear that she had contracted an illness. No history of maintaining a certain posture for long hours. Refusal to eat, talk, sudden excitement. No history of suspiciousness. False firm beliefs that someone was trying to harm her, conspire against her, or harassing her. No history of hearing voices when in isolation. No history of sudden bursts of anxiety, fear that something bad would happen. No history of repetitive unwanted thoughts or actions. No history of continuous elated mood, increased planning activities, decreased need for sleep. No history of swelling in the neck region, pain in the neck region, discharging sinuses, swelling in the axilla or groin. No history of change in the quality of voice, hoarseness of voice. No history of hemoptysis, hematemesis, abdominal pain, bilious vomiting. No history of previous tumors. No history of high-grade fever with projectile vomiting, loss of consciousness or seizures. No history of substance use. The patient has a history of hypothyroidism. She has been on treatment for 10 years on regular medications with tablet Thyronorm, 100 micrograms, 1 in the morning. The patient had received treatment at a tertiary care hospital on an outpatient basis about 1 month ago for feeling sad and crying spells with wishes to end her life. She was prescribed oral medications to be taken at night and reported a 10% improvement in her symptoms. No alternative treatment and counseling sessions were done at that point. The patient reported no adverse drug reactions to the medicines that were prescribed to her. So may I continue? Family history?
Yeah, continue.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Yeah, Vasundhara just wanted to know about the information on vomiting. Like she feels, what I understood was she had a feeling of something stuck in the throat and she used to try to vomit. That's what I understand.
Yes, sir.
Is it right?
So she used to cough and strain to expel her spit, sir. But she said only colorless spit is what used to be expectorated, and nothing else would come out.
How many
She would not.
How many times she used to do this?
In a single time, she said 10 to 12 times, and she would usually spend 2 to 3 hours in the bathroom during the day doing so.
She'll be continuously trying to vomit. That's what I understand. Does it have a compulsive nature?
No, sir. I clarified that at the point, sir. She did not spit out of any. There were no unwanted repetitive thoughts for which
See, the repetitive thought here is of obsession is something stuck in my throat. Something stuck in my throat is a thought which comes repeatedly to her mind, and she's doing a compulsive act of repeatedly trying to vomit or trying to clear her throat by spitting.
Yes, sir.
There was like, we used to do it for 2 hours, means it appears to be, was there any compulsive nature, feeling of relaxed or relieved after doing another 2 hours? And in a day, how many episodes used to occur?
So these episodes of 2 to 3 hours would be throughout the day in divided time durations. This is a total duration that I have mentioned. So at the point, she would not feel relieved even after expectoration of spit. She would continue to be distressed about the feeling that was constantly present in her throat.
Okay, what I understand is it's a multiple episodes used to occur. What used to trigger these episodes?
So the episodes would happen as a result of attempting to expectorate the feeling of the lump or sensation in the throat of something being stuck.
Yeah, is it associated with any food? Usually does it occur with the food or taking something or without anything? She used to get this thought.
So it used to be there without the presence of food consumption as well. It was there for both solid as well as liquid foods. It was present due to which she was unable to eat food.
So if I rephrase your words, what we have understood is she used to get these urges or thoughts or whatever you can call it as sensation of something stuck in her throat, not associated with food intake or anything. And it used to occur multiple
No.
episodes. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, sir. So she used to feel this sensation continuously throughout the day, even when she was not consuming food. She would experience this sensation, sir. It was not something that she would think about, sir.
Okay, these sensation used to be same or used to increase or decrease?
So the sensation used to be persistent, sir. There was no relief in the symptoms. There were aggravating factors. It used to stay throughout. It had aggravated over a duration of time, sir. Initially, there for the past 6 months, it remained the same, and then it progressed to her not being able to consume food and as well as her own saliva. She said that it would not go inside because she would continuously feel this stuck sensation.
Okay, that means she used to have the sensation of something stuck in her throat continuously. And she used to spend approximately 2 to 3 hours per day trying to clear it off. That's what we have understood.
Yes, sir.
That's right, Vasundhara. Okay. Is there any other repeated thoughts or acts apart from these two?
No, sir.
Washing,
No repeated.
checking.
No, sir. Washing, checking, counting behaviors, feelings of contamination. No, sir. No other obsessive behaviors as well.
Okay, if you ask her why she used to spend time in the bathroom, is it only for spitting? That's what I understand.
Yes. Training and coughing in an attempt to expel the particles, sir.
Did she proclaim about these symptoms to everyone? Asking, yeah, I have this problem. She used to tell everyone, or she never used to tell this?
So all of her family members, multiple consultations with the specialists as well as physicians for not being able to diagnose her, for not being able to, despite reassurances and alternative explanations, she would complain to her family members for not taking the illness seriously or neglecting her.
So basically, she used to proclaim about her symptoms to everyone. That's what I understand.
Yes.
Is it right?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so the reason being why I asked you a couple of questions is one is whether it is it OCD. OCD patients having these symptoms are very, very secretive about the symptoms. Secretive in the sense, basically they will never tell anybody. And their even
Yes.
consultation would be very rare. And more they knew that there is some amount of doubts in that and it will be a compulsive nature and they will be relieved after doing compulsions. So here is a constant feeling of some sensation in the throat, clearing it. So this is what the symptoms are there, and she's proclaiming about the symptoms to everyone. That is the answer. Anybody has any doubts can ask.
Yeah, Vasundhara, so you mean to say that this one particular thought does not have a repetitive nature to it, like what sir was clarifying, and it is present throughout the day without that repetitive nature. Are we right on this regard?
Yes, sir.
Arun, it's not a thought, it's a sensation. That's what she is clear.
Yes.
It's a sensation, not a thought. That's what Vasundhara was mentioning. Am I right, Vasundhara? It's a sensation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's a sensation that she experiences in her throat constantly throughout the day.
Okay, it's a more of sensation, proclaiming to everyone. That is very, very essential part of, and claiming that nobody is in this issue, and she's not, doesn't feel that irrationality is not there. Okay, Bindi, Modi, somebody, would you like to ask any question, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Actually, I want to ask about the history of forgetfulness because regarding any organic etiology.
She has clarified, I think. Vasundhara, would you like to clarify?
So the patient did not have any memory impairments, no history of falls, loss of consciousness, seizures, high-grade vomiting, with fever with projectile vomiting episodes.
Yeah, and I think one person has asked a question about it. Unlikely it appears to be OCD. Simple reason is it's not a thought, and there is no irrationality. And whenever there is irrationality, usually they don't say to anybody. They don't discuss this issue. OCD patients rarely they discuss about these symptoms, telling that I have this problem and I'm asking many doctors. Unlikely they do that. And monosymptomatic, only one symptom having something stuck in the throat and trying to clear, unlikely it is OCD. It's a very remote possibility. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else? Okay, if there are no questions, Vasundhara, you can go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Family history, sir. Patient is the firstborn out of a non-consanguineous marriage. Father passed away at 70 years of age with a myocardial infarction. Mother passed away at age 82 with age-related complications. The younger brother is 74 years of age who passed away 4 months ago with age-related complications. The third sister is 74 years of age, educated up to second PUC, married, homemaker, with poor communication with the patient, with very limited visits with the patient. The youngest sibling is a brother, 65 years of age, married. He's a diploma in engineering, retired engineer. She describes him as someone who is supportive and caring. There is no history of any carcinomas in the family or tumors in the family. No history of low mood, suicide attempts, or substance use in the family. Currently, the patient lives in a joint family with her second son and daughter-in-law, along with the granddaughter. The husband is the decision maker of the house. Finances in the house are divided between the husband's pension and the son's salary. There is poor communication between the family members. There are interpersonal issues between the daughter-in-law and the patient. Poor support and communication from the son's side. The family does not understand the illness and is burdened by the illness. Personal history. So birth and development history as well as schooling history, the relevant attender was not present. Occupational history, the patient finished her SSLC and worked as a teacher temporarily for the 4th grade till her marriage. And she left her job at 20 years of age. She consented and left her job out of choice. The marital history, the patient has had an arranged marriage of 60 years duration. She got married at 20 years of age. It was a non-consanguineous marriage. They mutually consented for marriage. Her husband is 82 years of age, educated up to diploma in agriculture, retired assistant in research development. She describes him as attentive and supportive to his needs. She has 2 sons. The elder son is 52 years of age, married, PhD, central government employee, staying in a separate house with his wife. She describes him as someone who does not want involvement in her life. The younger son is 50 years of age, married, educated up to the 10th standard. He's also a central government employee, and he's currently living with the patient. There is no history of substance abuse by the patient. The pre-morbid personality. The patient maintains good social relations with her family and peers. She has good leadership qualities and is an independent lady. She intellectual ability is reading books and newspapers. The mood predominantly remains cheerful. She accepts responsibility and plans the tasks ahead of her time. She remains energetic with irregular fluctuations. She has no particular habits or fantasies. General examination. The patient is a thin-built, poorly nourished lady. Her height is 5 feet 2 inches. Weight is 35 kgs. Her BMI is 15.1, classified as underweight. Her blood pressure is 100 by 80 milligrams of mercury, taken in the right forearm in the supine position. Her heart rate is 84 beats per minute with regular pulse, rhythmicity, and force. The patient head-to-toe examination. The patient has no pallor, icterus, clubbing, cyanosis, lymphadenopathy, and edema. Head-to-toe examination. I'm sorry, sir. I should have said this earlier. There is no wasting of the tongue, no involuntary movements or fasciculations of the tongue present, no thyroid swelling, no discharging sinuses, no history of sunken eyes, no history of hyperpigmented patches over her skin. Systemic examination. CNS, she is central nervous system. She is conscious oriented with no focal deficits present. CVS. S1, S2 sounds are heard with no abnormal sounds. Respiratory system, air entry bilaterally equal, no added adventitious sounds are present. Per abdomen, soft, non-tender with no organomegaly.
Vasundhara, just a doubt. Did you also do her oral cavity examination?
Yes, I did. So that's why. So I did an oral cavity examination to observe movements of the soft palate and uvula on R sounds, and there seemed to be no abnormality. The movements were normal, and no wasting or involuntary movements of no wasting of the tongue, and no involuntary movements of the tongue were present.
Could you also find out anything in her throat or in her laryngeal recess, something like that?
I'm that's a very valid point, sir. Thank you. I did not look for swellings in the larynx, sir, but she had undergone previous multiple investigations that were suggestive of no obstruction or growth that was present in her oral cavity and pharyngeal larynx.
ENT opinion was taken?
The ENT opinion was taken.
Okay, so there was organic cause for this obstruction has been ruled out.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
And it would also be probably wise to mention whether there were any leukoplakia or candidiasis or any of these in the oral cavity, because they also
Thank you, sir.
can cause obstruction, kind of obstruction in the oral cavity. Like deglutition, swallowing difficulties would be present with that. So were there any issues regarding leukoplakia or oral cavity candidiasis in this patient?
So I did not look for those, sir, but I would do so in the future, sir. It is a very valid point, sir. Thank you.
Vasundhara, given the case, would you want to examine CNS first or GI system first?
So I would like to look for the CNS first.
Given all these symptoms pertaining to the GI system largely,
Yes.
would you still want
Yes.
to examine the CNS as the first system?
Yes, sir. For the reason that if we're looking at pseudobulbar palsy or bulbar palsy with dysphagia and dysarthria and wasting in the muscles of the tongue, so I would like to examine the central nervous system first in this patient.
Okay.
One more thing, please, to the students, don't enter into the area where you are not certainly sure. Like you're talking about pseudobulbar palsy, bulbar palsy. If the examiner, you are giving a cue to the examiner to ask questions in that area. If you are very good, please lead them. Otherwise, say that I would like to do CNS examination. If you enter into that area, if you are very good in this, like suppose if I'm the examiner in DNB, I'll ask you, okay, tell me what is pseudobulbar palsy, what are the causes of bulbar palsy, pseudobulbar palsies, how do you examine it, what are the different nerves involved, what are the cranial nerves are involved, and what are the etiology of this. These questions will be, it's like inviting for, one is, if you are good in CNS, it's an amazing way of leading them. If you don't know, it will be a problematic.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Mental status examination. Patient was a thin-built lady wearing a sari, sitting in a stooped posture in a head-low position. She was unkempt, poorly groomed with uncombed hair. Eye-to-eye contact was poor. Attitude towards the examiner was disinterested. Rapport was established with difficulty. There were no tics, mannerisms, grimacing, or catatonic signs present. Monosyllabic replies. It was relevant, coherent. Tone, tempo, volume was decreased. The reaction time was increased. Sample of speech. When I asked the patient to speak on a neutral topic such as Diwali, she said, "I don't know what you want. It is a festival. I don't know what to tell you." From the above speech sample, thought, form, stream, and possession could not be evaluated. But historically, over the past 1 week, the content was suggestive of somatic delusions. The delusions were false, firm, fixed, non-bizarre somatic delusions, single, elaborated, systematized, mood congruent with acting out behavior. The mood, subjectively, on subjective assessment, she reported that I've had enough medicine, from which I inferred that she seemed to be irritable. Objectively, the patient, on objective assessment, the patient was depressed. Range was restricted to sadness. The reactivity was normal. It was congruent to the thought process, and no lability of mood was present. There were no perceptual abnormalities, such as olfactory, gustatory hallucinations, as well as auditory hallucinations. No experiences such as depersonalization, derealization. Cognitive functions. The patient was was able to recall what time of the day it was, name of the place where she was in, and the name of, she was able to recognize her husband. Her attention and concentration was tested by the serial subtraction, which on continuous persuasion, she was only able to do 100 minus 7 up to 1 time. She was not able, memory, she was able to I assessed the digit span and she was able to say so correctly with the numbers 2, 1, 3, 7, 8 in forward. However, backward she was only able to recall up to 3 times. The recent events, she was currently able to recall what she ate for breakfast. She was able to correctly state her home address, which I corroborated with the husband and was normal. Remote events, she was able to number. She recalled the number of her children, her years of marriage, from which I inferred that remote memory was intact. General intelligence, a general fund of knowledge could not be assessed. The level of comprehension, vocabulary, and reasoning were difficult to ascertain. Comprehension, abstraction, similarities and differences. Similarities on constant persuasion, the patient did not cooperate. However, on constantly persuading, she was able to talk about differences between a chair and a table. She said in a chair was used to sit and a table was used to write. Proverbs at the point were not assessed, could not be assessed. The judgment, personal and social judgment were impaired. Test judgment, when I asked her about what she would do when a child was falling to a pond, she gave an appropriate response, from which I assessed that her test judgment was intact. Her insight was grade 2. So questions?
In the judgment, can you, in the test judgment, can you tell what you asked and what exactly was her answer, and how did you conclude that her test judgment was intact?
Yes, sir. So I asked her about what she would do when the child was falling into a pond. At the point, she said that she would ask for help or attempt to get the child out of a pond by her own.
Why would she do that? Did you ask as
So
to
in
why?
order to save the child from drowning, sir.
That's what we think, but did we ask her why would she do that?
No, sir. I'm sorry. I did not.
One of the commonest questions usually asked for this, in the letter test or in the fire test, usually the letter test is the one which is asked. In that, if people tell that, for example, I'll just leave it and or I'll just post it, that wouldn't be enough to say
Yes.
whether the person has good test judgment or not. We should also know the reason
Yes.
behind the judgment. So judgment doesn't stop
Yes, sir.
by the action of the person. What we are trying to
Yes,
look
sir.
at is the reason as to why this action is being done by this person. So it would be good if we ask them further question as to why would they do that. Many a times people might think that it is we are being funny, or we are not completely understanding them. But if we tell them that we want to understand what the line of thinking was, people will usually answer. That's one of them.
Thank you, sir. Yes,
The
sir.
other
Thank
thing
you.
is that the entire history was that revolved around something stuck in the throat, right?
Yes, sir.
And in the MSc, you also said that there were no hallucinations in this person. Could this be
Yes, sir.
a respiratory hallucination? Could this be a somatic hallucination? If not, why? If yes, why? Could this be? What do you think now?
So, from what I understand, sir, I believe that this was a belief that she had, and that there was a feeling of something being stuck in her throat. But yes, sir, it's a valid point, sir. I would definitely look for differentiation.
Understandable that she has a feeling, but is it only a
Yes, sir.
or is it a sensation? She
does have a sensation, sir. Yes, sir.
So is it substantial enough? So
Yes, sir.
how would we tell it's a hallucination versus imagery versus a pseudo hallucination versus a delusion? It would also depend on the substantiality of this experience which this person is going through. So here the person feels really that there is something stuck, and she tries to even remove it by vomiting. So she has a sensation which is there. So it could be a hallucination also. Right?
Vasundhara, we started the case where we said that this is a sensation. Throughout the history, this was a sensation, and on your MSc, it became an abnormality with the kind of the thought. How did you say that was a delusion? And you said that it is a single elaborate. By elaborate, I mean that you're trying to convey that this is a systematized delusion, right? So what was systematic about this particular delusion? How did you say that this was a delusion? This particular one sensation can be part of many other neurotic illness in the neurotic spectrum also, right? So how did you differentiate from all that to say that this is a delusion? Two, could you tell me how systematized this was? What was the systematic nature? How did you establish that?
So I believed it was a delusion because she was amenable to any alternative explanations, whether given by professionals or people at home. She continued believing that there was something stuck in her throat, and she would refuse anybody else's. The delusion had sort of.
Okay, so in other words, like let us say, I'm going to, I want to entertain a DD of, let us say, a somatoform illness here, because there is only one symptom that is going on in the throat, and she is having this particular symptom with this sensation. It can be a hypochondriacal or a somatic delusion, like you are saying. But how would you really establish that this is a delusion? From the description, I understand the conviction part. What else would you look for to say that this is a delusion?
To continue, for example,
even she was.
To continue with what Dr. Arun was telling, that people with even hypochondriacal disorder also would have a conviction, a great conviction like this. Need not be a delusion. So how would you differentiate in that time?
So in case of a hypochondriacal delusion, sir, the person is more preoccupied with contracting a serious illness with disabling consequences,
Ma'am,
whereas
okay, let's
the focus is on the illness. Whereas,
could we just say how would you establish a delusion? Like what are the criteria for saying that this is a delusion?
so the criteria for saying is the conviction that the patient holds for the delusion,
That is one. What are the others? What are the
the
others?
elaboration of a delusion,
Okay, good.
the amount of time spent preoccupied with the delusion.
So Vasundhara, when someone is asking that, indirectly I'm trying to ask you what are the vectors of this delusion? Like how many vectors did this satisfy for you to call this a delusion? This is what I'm indirectly trying to ask you. So, like for
Yes, sir.
instance, for you to say that this is a delusion, the elaboration and to say that this is systematized, you need to in your MSc you need to show that this is really systematized, because if you look at it, other than some extension that you have bought out, we are unable to see the systematization in entirety. The acting out behavior is definitely there if we are going to take that, but does this satisfy to be bizarre? Does this satisfy to be disorganized? So these are some of the other vectors that we should probably think about. And you say that it is a grade 2 insight. So that is the thing about the thought part. Grade 2 insight. Why would you say that this is a grade 2 insight? Because the patient is saying that she has an illness, she's saying that she has a physical illness, and she is going on seeking treatment. So in this case, why would you say that she has a grade 2 insight? She is going from doctor to doctor. She is saying that she has a physical illness. So why would you say that this patient
Yes.
has a grade 2 insight?
So she accepts that she has an illness, and at the same time she says that
Except that she has
so acceptance.
illness, no? So the grade cannot be grade 2, no? It could be somewhere higher also.
Why not grade 3?
So she does not talk about her external factors leading to her illness. She does not attribute her illness to external factors at this
She's
point.
saying that she
saying
has
no.
a physical illness.
The fact that she's telling that I have a illness and it is something physical in nature, it's not mental in nature.
Yes, sir.
Itself,
Yes, sir.
the attribution is to physical illness. That's external.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would the
Yes,
would the insight be of something which is much higher grade? Would you
Yes,
want to
sir.
consider that?
So I would like to consider grade 3 in that case.
Thank you. Bindi, you have a question. Can you unmute and ask?
Yeah, so my question is regarding selecting speech sample. So
Mhm.
I have read one book that they have given in that book that we have to ask.
Could we stick to this particular case?
Yeah, sure. For this particular case, I don't have any doubt, but I have to ask regarding speech sample.
Yeah, you can go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah.
So how can we select our speech sample? Because I have read in one book that first we have to ask abstract topic, then we have to ask semi-abstract, and then we have to ask concrete topic. And according to that, we have to select our speech sample. So, and in DNB exam, we have very limited time. So how can we do this in DNB examination? Like in abstract topic, we have to ask about current politics or current affair in India. Then in semi-abstract topic, we have to ask how to celebrate Diwali or Holi. And in concrete topic, how to prepare coffee or tea. So how can we select our speech sample?
Thank you for the question. But usually, see, as you rightly pointed out, in many exams, not only DNB exams, in all the exams, we'll not have enough time to collect this. But when we are seeing a patient in an inpatient basis, yes, we can collect all these things. But what is usually done is to give a neutral topic, semi-abstract neutral topic, for them to comment on using their own language. And then probably what we are trying to do here by speech sample is to try and see whether these thoughts are organized, and also see whether any of the thought deviances come out in this semi-abstract topic. Now, what happens when we give them non, say for example, if we give them something which is related to their delusions, which is non-neutral, would be that the delusions would come out easily. But since we should not do that, give them a neutral topic so that even in that, if delusions come out, or the content comes out, like for example, if in this case she had said that she starts off with Deepavali and tells, okay, Diwali to itna manate hai, we'll do Deepavali, but there is not, it's not worth celebrating right now because I am already old, I want to die. If these things come out, then it would be probably telling that the content is of depression in nature. If she starts with Deepavali and tells that we prepare a lot of sweets, but right now I can't eat sweet because I am having this lump in my throat, so it will go on to probably this delusion. So what we are essentially looking at is how these thoughts are organized, one, and whether these follow an order, whether there is a stream, and whether what the content of this is. But in this case, for example, Vasundhara said that she could not come stream, form, content of the thought disorder. One thing is that here there is at least poverty of thought. If you have not gotten enough thought content, you can comment at least on the poverty of here, which
for all practical purposes for the DNB final exam, you will have to stick to just a neutral sample, and you will have to even time manage. If you look at the textbooks, the amount of time that you really need to get a thought sample is very different. For practical purposes, you will have to stick to a certain time and give them a neutral topic and comment on whatever you have your findings on the basis of that.
Arun sir?
Yeah.
So I would, when I did look at delusions in this patient, I looked at the effective response that she had to her delusions, the extent of conviction that she had, the preoccupation that she had with her delusions, and the acting on her delusions. So that's how I came to the conclusion.
Yeah. So basically, that question was directed at at asking you how to. The examiner would probably ask you something like that. Let's check whether you know about the Kendall's vectors to establish the delusion.
Yes,
that is why that question.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
One more thing that one more thing was that when you are telling about orientation, you said for time, place, and person, which is her husband.
Yes,
What about orientation self?
So she was able to assess. She was able to recognize that she was in the hospital at the point.
That's place.
How would I? Yes.
So what we should remember is that orientation to time, place, and person. In the person, there are two subdivisions: orientation to others,
Yes,
and orientation to self. And usually,
Yes,
in a
sir.
person with any neurological disorder of long-standing illness, especially with dementia, it vanishes in this order. So first to go is time, then place, then in person, others, and last to go away is about self. So that is why
So how would
in
I
this
ask questions? Yeah, sorry, sir. I'm
uh,
sorry, sir.
in this case, probably it would because of her age also. It would also be good to look at whether she is also having any dementia, or whether she's having any delirium associated with dementia, and that is why she is behaving like this. Just a long shot, not that it is related directly, but the orientation itself would tell where probably she stands. And how to ask about orientation to self is the way we ask about others, like who is this person who's standing next to you? They'll tell, okay, this is this person. Similarly, who are can you tell me about yourself? That would have come in the history itself.
Yes.
Tell me about yourself, who you are and what you do. That itself will tell, okay, I am so and so person. My name is so and so. I am so and so. that itself would be sufficient to tell whether the person has orientation to self.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
So,
sir.
Vasundhara, at this point of time, what are your differential diagnoses?
So I was going to, so my differential diagnosis at this point would
Just a
be
minute.
to rule out.
Just a second,
Vasundhara.
Vasundhara. Just a second.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding the history, like right from history till now? Before we move on to formulation, does anybody have any doubts? Anybody want to ask anything? I'm asking this because as and when Vasundhara is formulating, I also want you people to think about differential diagnosis for this case. And then when when Vasundhara tells about the differentials, then think on how you mentalize these differentials and whether it matches to what Vasundhara is thinking. And then depending on the discussion, whether it would match to the discussion. So I want all of us to think about the differentials at this point of time when Vasundhara is presenting the formulation. So yeah, can Vasundhara, can you formulate the case, and then we'll want to
Yes.
the discussion.
Yes, sir. So, Mrs. I, 80-year-old female, married, educated up to SSLC, homemaker, belonging to a middle socio-economic status, Hindu by religion, belonging to urban Bangalore, with a well-adjusted pre-morbid personality, with no significant personal history, with no significant contributory family history, with a past history of treatment of, on oral medications for about 1 month, with poor response of 10%, with a known case of hypothyroidism on treatment, presented with a history of 3 days duration of feeling a stuck sensation in the throat for the past 3 years, difficulty in eating for the past 2 years, feeling tired easily for the past 1 year, decreased interest in activities for the past 1 year, and death wishes for the past 3 months, which was insidious in onset, continuous in course, with no current precipitating factors identified. On mental status, on general examination, her vitals were stable. Her BMI was 15.1, classified as underweight, with no head-to-toe abnormalities present. With systemic examination was normal. The mental status examination was suggestive of poverty of speech, somatic delusions, depressive cognitions, suicidal ideations. The mood was, the affect was depressed, range was restricted to sadness, and reactivity was normal. There was no lability of mood. But social and personal judgment were impaired, test judgment being intact, insight being grade 3. I would like to make a provisional diagnosis of F32.3, severe depression with psychotic features.
Vasundhara, all those things that you talked about in the family history of the patient not having support, having not very great
Yes, sir.
relationships with the family members,
Yes,
the
sir.
son, all that, do you think that should come up in the formulation?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes, sir. I should add that. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Do you have any differential diagnosis for this, or is it only one single provisional diagnosis that you have?
In this case, I would still like to proceed with a thorough examination to rule out any malignancies, sir, corroborating with a physician if I could.
Which has been done, no? They have taken multiple consults. In terms of
Yes, sir.
diagnosis, ICD diagnosis, any other differentials that you would entertain?
So at this point, I would consider somatoform disorders. But since in the hierarchical approach, she fits into marked depressive symptoms, I would like to take a primary diagnosis of severe depression with psychotic features.
If this, as we discussed, if this sensation is a hallucination, would
Yes,
you
sir.
go with severe depression with psychotic features, and put this into psychotic spectrum, or would you go to higher up in the order in ICD?
So, due to her marked affective symptoms, I would still like to consider a diagnosis of severe depression with psychotic features.
Why not things like schizoaffective disorder, for example?
So she does not. So the symptoms, there are no persisting psychotic symptoms in the absence of affective symptoms in this case. The predominant affective symptoms are present, so I would not consider diagnosis of schizoaffective. So.
Vasundhara, just to clarify, like, you know, I understand the patient meets the criteria for depression and depression for the past 1 year, but your diagnosis does not factor in for the previous 2 years, where the predominant symptom has been the sensation. So, you know, how would we look at that? How would we explain that with your diagnosis of depression with psychotic symptoms? I understand there are depressive cognitions of late only since the past 1 year, but how would we explain the symptoms prior to that for the past 2 years?
How do you
So
explain
even
the,
during the
sorry, for example, how would you explain the sensation of lump in the throat, even without depressive cognition, before the depressive cognition started?
So it did start as a lump in the throat, but over the past 2 years, she has had depressive cognitions with intermittent crying spells in the middle,
No, I'm not.
feeling neglected,
I'm not.
along with the symptoms.
Sorry, I'm not refuting your diagnosis of depression at this point of time.
Yes.
Yes, sectionally, she appears to be depressed. She has all MSc findings and historical findings of depression. But is it more than that? Is what I want to know.
Vasundhara, and is it normal for someone to be depressed for 2 years continuously?
So if you look at it this time, yeah. So.
Okay, but it is meeting for a criteria for MDD only, no? Currently?
Currently, so severe depression. So.
Okay. So, like, let us say if you were to choose between two things to rule out to explain the initial 2 years of symptoms, could we let's just look at those 2 years and see if you what will be your DDs to explain those initial 2 years of symptoms? Like, one, you said that patient. Yeah, tell me.
Yes. Please continue, sir.
Yeah. So one you said that, you know, it started off as a sensation. So we have one differential diagnosis there. Second, you said that, you know, on your MSc, you said that the patient has a delusion. So, you know, if it is a delusion, it is a single delusion. So, you know, are there any other diagnosis to which will totally, yes, patient could have a depression with psychotic features or a severe depression also. But to explain that initial symptomatology, would you want to consider any other two diagnoses if given a choice?
So, I would like to consider somatization disorder, so somatic symptom disorder and hypochondriacal disorder.
Is it somatization or somatoform?
Somatization. Somatoform.
Okay.
You confirm.
I'm sorry.
Last choice.
I'm sorry. It is somatoform disorders.
All right. What else would you consider? Given that, okay, one, you would consider somatoform disorder. What else would you consider? You said that patient has one delusion. This is an elderly patient. This is an old patient, 80-year-old. Suddenly, for 3 years, is talking about one particular delusion. So, would you consider anything? You said that this was very systematized. So, would you consider anything else?
So, differential of any organicity and persistent delusion disorder.
Okay.
What Arun was trying to ask is about persistent delusional disorder, whether that could be one of the diagnoses. But what we should also remember is that this is a unusual presentation. What is the usual age at which depression would present? For example, severe depression with psychotic features. What is the usual age at which it would present?
So, middle adult life, somewhere around.
Yeah. So she doesn't belong to that category.
Yes.
She's a geriatric patient. It has all started after 75 years of age.
Yes.
So that's one of the things which will that okay, this is somewhat different there's a difference in presentation for this patient. That's one. The second thing is that this is staying from 2 years and more, and it initially did not start with depression, but started with something else, and then progressed into severe depression at this point of time. So that's another unusuality of this presentation. And third, it is staying as it is from past 2 years. Usually, how long would a depressive episode stay if it had come even at this age? How long would a depressive episode stay? Natural course.
So 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, 6 to 9 months. And here it is more than that. You can't simply put it because it is. You can't simply put it into dysthymia because you can categorize her into a severe depression here. So you can't put her into dysthymia.
Yes.
So now there are so many unusual things in the history which point us that it is not just severe depression we are talking about. It is much more than that. So one of the things, as you pointed out, might be organicity. We'll still search for organicity with whether she has, say, for example, pernicious anemia, uh, uh, whether she has web in the throat, whether there's other issues. If she doesn't have, then it is good. Then we'll look at whether she has any in the higher order, whether she has any, because it can be hallucination, it can be a delusion. So whether she has persistent delusional disorder, or whether it's a bizarre hallucination, and whether it should be considered as schizophrenia. Then coming to depression, then going on to somatoform disorder. So which of these would you think would would she best fit into, given all these reasons?
So at the point, I would like to stick to my diagnosis. But yes, in the hierarchy, I would like to rule out organicity, then psychotic symptoms, then depressive symptoms, then
Um, um, Vasundhara, actually, when like the depression with psychotic symptoms diagnosis will not explain this case of 3 years. So when the examiner is probably giving you a hint to change your final diagnosis, you should take it because that is your chance to probably, and that's very important because that is given just so that that is so that you could probably, because in the 45 minutes it is very difficult to probably have that sort of a preparation, and even if we have faltered they would probably give you a chance, but it is important for us to understand that and take it immediately.
So now what is so since this is the first case presentation we are having, I would also like to tell you what usually people look at in case presentation. What we examiners look at is not whether somebody is able to present or not, whether somebody is able to come to diagnosis or not, come to an ICD diagnosis. What is looked at is that you have certain information, and how are you able to analyze that information and come to a conclusion using that information. And many a times, as is with this case, you will have many unusual things in that presentation. So are you able to consider all those unusual discrepancies in the history, and then come to different differential diagnosis, so that we'll do more investigations, a thorough investigation, and then probably try to manage this person. The same thing would happen even in our lives also. When we sit and start seeing patients, it is not very easy to see what the person is having. So at that point of time, given information, what diagnosis would be better in this patient is what we are trying to see. So what we have seen in this case is that that there is a lot of unusual there is a lot of unusual presentation in this case, and because of that reason, she also could probably go into persistent delusional disorder more than 2 years. So why not put it there? Why not put it as a differential diagnosis or first differential diagnosis? and second differential diagnosis being later she developed into depression. So whether you're able to organize your history into relevant diagnosis so that you can manage the history. So that is what usually is seen. Dr. Suresh or Dr. Mahesh, can you also enlighten us on, because you have been the examiners even for DNB students, can you also please enlighten us on this, sir?
See, dear students, one thing I would like to mention is you will have less time. Hardly you will have 30 to 45 minutes. During this time, you will be very anxious and you will not know what to do. The best thing would be don't fix on to one diagnosis. If I have this case, I would rather go ahead with the diagnosis of telling that she has a sensation, abnormal sensation in the throat, which is stuck, and she has this clearing sensation. She has to do it repeatedly. And I would rather not focus on telling that it's a delusion. I would rather say it may be possible sensation versus a thought. I would proceed in that direction and give a differential diagnosis. The differential diagnosis, I would like to keep it considering the age being on the higher side. I would like to investigate for organicity. Is there really something? Because the age goes in, though the ANT has been taken, why not one more opinion before we proceed with the aggressive management of psychiatric diagnosis?
Yes, sir.
First thing would be thinking in terms of, yes, there is something problem is there. In the exam, you may not be able to get the ENT information telling that ENT rule out has been done, or we do not get the investigations which has already done. So best thing would be to say present it as a first as a organicity considering the age, and she may have a lump. A. B would be, I would rather go with the diagnosis of globus stericus versus the globus pharyngeus, what is the newer term what has been used, or else you can even tell that as a somatization. The third I would rather consider as possibility, remote possibility of OCD. So fourth one would be delusional disorder. So keeping what we call it as a differential diagnosis would be the best way to go forward rather than fixing on one diagnosis. The issue will be if you fix onto one diagnosis of delusional disorder, the examiner may say, no, it is a somatization disorder. Why are you considering it as a delusional disorder? It will be difficult to defend. And also the examiner also would like to know that you are flexible rather than rigid and telling that, no, this is the diagnosis. So the examiner would like to know the process, how you arrived to the various differential diagnosis. So the best thing would be in such cases where you have clear-cut diagnosis is not possible, please keep differential diagnosis, 2 differential diagnosis, 3 differential diagnosis. Please do that rather than fixing on to one diagnosis telling that delusional disorder. Please don't do that. If it is a delusional disorder, it would be very difficult to defend yourself, because if I am the examiner, I will say it is OCD. And then you will be finding it very difficult, because I am working in the area of OCD for nearly 15 to 20 years. Yes, possible. If there is a possible, one is tic disorder. Why not? There is abnormal sensation in the throat and clearing sensation. Tic disorder is chronic tic disorder is one possibility which can be seen again. And then the investigation MRI I want to do, because the organic tic disorder can be possibility is there where there is abnormal sensation and clearing throat as a tic is a possible phenomena. So better is going in terms of organicity as a tic disorder and then moving on to what we call it as somatization disorder, and then moving to OCD, and finally considering it as a delusional disorder. That would be the best way to present in the exam. Management is a different ball game, but in the exam, the examiner would like to know how flexible you are, how are able to consider differential diagnosis. That's what the examiner is looking for it, rather than one single diagnosis. And especially in DNB and MD exams, unlikely we're going to keep a direct, what we call it as a single diagnosis. Invariably it will have differential diagnosis or dual diagnosis. In this case, definitely there is a diagnosis of depression which is present. Most probably there is a severe weight reduction is there, and also there is some, what we call it as depressive symptoms. Major depression also can be considered as one of the, what we call it as comorbid condition. So that's the way you have to approach the case. It's not the diagnosis which matters in psychiatry. It is how you approach the case, how you are going to defend your cases. Providing differential diagnosis plays a major role in your exam.
Mahesh sir.
I think this was a very interesting case for the fact that we wanted her to give a wide range of psychopathology from neurosis to delusional disorder to having severe depression and also some cognitive decline issues. I think it's a very difficult case to have one diagnosis and defend it. I'm sure there'll be more than one diagnosis that anybody will come upon. And I'm sure the way you're going to tease out the psychopathology is all that's going to decide your ability to present this case. In terms of management also, there'll be too many choices of drugs and the way you want to manage. But I think, hello?
Yes, sir. We are able to hear.
The video went off. That's why I thought something went wrong. So I think more than anything, it would be the wide range of psychopathology, your conceptual understanding about all these things, and how you're actually going to say that this is there or not there that really matters in this case.
Yes.
I'm happy that you could present it and actually give the wide range of discussions here. I'm sure no other case would have elicited so much of discussions either.
Yeah. What students should also remember is that giving multiple differential diagnosis does not mean that you are not aware of concepts. Usually, many a times what we as students would do is that, oh, if I give 3 or 4 differential diagnoses, that would probably tell the examiner that I don't know anything in this. That is why I am giving so many differential diagnoses. No, it is not always true. What we should also remember is that giving a differential diagnosis will help us in formulating and understanding different, being flexible as BMS sir was telling, and also formulating different pathways to see how to care best for this person. And at this point of time, we are telling differential diagnosis because we also want to investigate further in the management and see where it would take us. If we firmly fix into one thing and like say, if we are delusional in that level in treating people, then what if it backfires? Then we'll fall into a lot of problems, and not only legally, ethically and morally also. So instead of fixing us into one thing at the historical level, at the history and MSc level, we can come up with as many as differential diagnoses as possible, then investigate further and then find out and come to a final diagnosis.
I think, we also need to congratulate Vasundhara for taking up the initiative as a first timer and putting her hands up and taking, a case which has stimulated so much of discussion. Congratulations to you, Vasundhara, for actually taking the first, starting off with the first case for Indians.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. First,
Thank you, sir.
Anybody has any questions?
Mahesh, sir. Yes, sir.
I think Dr. Jagdish is online, and I think he should also say a few words, is what I felt.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Dr.
Mahesh?
Jagdish.
Hello. Hi. Hello.
Yes, sir. We are able to hear you, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We are able to hear you.
It's a wonderful program. I sat through the discussion. Okay. Probably this will benefit a lot of DNB students because the training may not be uniform and they will not be seeing the examiners. For example, in any MD course, at least periodically they will have some exam. Whereas here, they need to be trained like this. I think this is the somatoform versus depression versus psychotic symptoms versus. This was an interesting case. I guess we should take the feedback from these people, and I hope we will have more case discussions that will be more beneficial. And the same students can join on Wednesday or Thursday when we launch program for postgraduate students. Thanks to Dr. Suresh Badamat and team, and also thanks to Spandana team, Dr. Mahesh especially. Thank you very much.
Sir, I would like to highlight also, by this month end, I think 31st August, we are launching forensic psychiatry for all MD DNB students. And then by the next month, 7th, we will be starting brain stimulation, that is ECT and RTMS and other thing. And by the next month end, we will be starting geriatric. Every month we will have classes. For DNB, this is exclusive classes for case discussion. And DNB students also are welcome to join other classes, which will be more of seminar type rather than the case discussion. So it's definitely, sir, we would like to take it to the higher level. And those seminars will be accompanied with notes. So our team member, one of us will contact all the members and discuss about how to go about using this platform. Mahesh, would you like to add anything else?
initiative that
Mahesh,
we wanted.
Yes, I
go ahead, Mahesh.
Yeah, I think we should also highlight, since Dr. Jagdish is here, that he's been behind this motive of wanting NIMHANS to anchor this telepsychiatry unit, and also to make sure that this sort of series happen on the Zoom software. And I'm glad it's coming out well. We must get in more interesting cases. No case that's presented should have one diagnosis. And I think it's good to have the presenter itself give a multiple differential diagnosis and talk about points in favor of each diagnosis or point against. So that that will be quite stimulating for the presenter himself or herself to look at different options that's available, and also to tease out why it's possible, why it's not possible. Any diagnosis that any is not a possibility by your own teasing out the psychopathology. I think we should also train them to make sure you are not actually dismissive towards any diagnosis. Yes, it is possible, but however, in this case, I thought it is not relevant because I found out all these things are not actually fitting in.
Okay. One more thing.
Thanks, Dr. Jagdish, for this initiative.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jagdish, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Jagdish, sir, you can speak now. We have unmuted it now.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful program. Hope you are able to hear me, and we continue to do this. I guess this we should also include more of child psychiatry, because this is the one area, a gray area where these students are not exposed. Second thing is about case conference, this thing, psychology, because different aspects of psychotherapy, then assessment. Probably let us work on these areas also. So I request Dr. Suresh and team to work on these areas also, please.
Yes, sir. We are anyhow starting forensic. The first class will be taken by Dr. Naveen. For the general, all MD students, DNB students, this platform definitely exclusively for students for case presentation, DNB students. And anyhow, I'm discussing with Dr. Mahesh regarding how to go about further. Dr. Chaitan and Dr. Arun is there to anchor us. And I request all the students to give feedback, what you want, how the case presentation should go. Is it one person will be presenting, or I request all of you to take this opportunity to present the case. I have been at least around 7 or 8 exams. I have been the examiner, and at least I know what the other examiners, at least 20 and odd examiners I have interacted. I know what they expect, and I also know what I should expect from the students. So please use this wonderful opportunity. Over to you, Chetan.
Thank you, sir. We thank Vasundhara that, as Arun was telling, that this is the first ever case presentation, and she is brave and bold enough to present in the first instance itself. So it is good. And what we should also remember is that as and when we are progressing through these case presentations, we'll refine our skills and we'll refine our knowledge. So as and when we progress, we'll become stronger and stronger in presenting the cases. And once it is done during your DNB exam, at the day of DNB exam, it will be a smooth sail. Trust me, I had given 5 case presentations just before going to the DNB exam. The 6th case was in the DNB exam, and it was very easy for me to convince what I wanted. It was a difficult case. We had differential diagnosis, we had back and forth discussions, but in the end, the examiners and we could come to a common consensus, is what usually is seen for any exam. So when we continuously refine our skills in both presentation and in our knowledge, it would become easier on the day of exam. So that is what we are hoping to achieve with this. Vasundhara, do you want to tell anything in this?
No, so I'd like to thank everybody. I think it's been a very interactive session, and I've gotten a lot of feedback and how to define my presentation, and I will definitely work on that. I will definitely look into somatic illusions versus hallucinations as well, clarify my concepts a bit further. So nothing, so I'd just like to thank everybody. It's been wonderful.
Last final feedback. You have done a very good presentation. So don't get let down. The only thing is the last part, the defending the diagnosis, putting differential diagnosis. So in that way, for a second year students, according to me, you are at somewhere around out of 100, 75 to 80%. All the best. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It was a good presentation in the sense also that the history was adequate for a discussion to happen. the flow of presentation was very good. So kindly continue this flow of presentation. For
Thank you, sir.
this would conclude today's presentation. And for next week, next time's presentation, we'll give you the dates of when it would be. We would probably keep it on some other day other than Saturday, because we would also be launching both for MD and DNB theory classes on specialty aspects of psychiatry on Saturdays. So we'll communicate with you about the next case presentation shortly. And for the next case presentation, I think Dr. Bindi has already sent one of her cases. So if anybody else also will circulate in the group a week or 15 days prior, a week or 10 days prior to we conducting this. So you can, about 2-3 people can take cases, be ready with that, and send it in the group, so that it will be easy for us if one person is not able to present for any technical glitch like what happened last time, the other person can take over and present. If nothing else, then we are there here to conduct any theoretical classes as a backup plan.
Okay, one more thing is 31st August we will have a forensic classes will be starting. It will be a larger group. Please inform your 31st August. Dr. Navin will be taking the classes, and we will be circulating the materials like how to do forensic workup, especially in custodial setting. And also he will be discussing on the issue of how to do the fitness to trial assessment. And if somebody comes from North India, especially Dr. Jiloha or Dr. Nimesh Desai, they will ask questions about this fitness to stand trial, and also how to do examination for patients referred from custody or from prison. So we will, I will wait for you people to join on 31st August.
Thank you, sir. Thank. We also thank Linux Laboratories for giving us academic grant to run this program.